Welcome back. Today we are going to do some progress in the LuV tier. Namely, we haven't done the new circuits yet. And the first thing we have to do to unlock those is play fetch with the quest book. And that was a breeze. However, the second round starts to be more complicated. The first part of the second round is located on the moon of a planet of another solar system, but it was nothing harder than getting there and processing a new ore. The second step requires to find some stuff that we already managed to get a long time ago. Then we have to do some simple processing steps and it's done. For the last fetch quest, we have to change the acid we use to process rare earths. However, while that was enough for this fetch quest, it was not enough for the next step with the size we will want it to be. So we also added a new prioritized way of processing raw lead ores. The next quests requires to mix together all the stuff we fetched so far. It's nice to know that we didn't fetch all of that stuff for nothing. The issue is that the last step of that stuff has only a chance of succeeding. So, if we do not want our A2 system to get stuck due to the expected stuff that failed in the process, we shall make a pattern with more inputs than the required ones. Finally, when we try to craft that overcrafted item, we find ourselves presented with a huge list of ingredients. Luckily, our EBF stocked up quite some extra dusts that we can compact manually. And now we can complete the quest. And all the extra items we have produced in the meantime will be useful later on. And everything we did so far was just preparing the tools and materials for the real circuitry industry. The circuits we are going to do today are part of the crystal processor series, which starts from emerald crystals. However, making those with emeralds is quite expensive and has low success chances. The better way is with raw crystal chip parts. But those parts are made with the crystal we need. So, we go with the emerald way. And here you can see our first failed attempt. We keep trying until we get a successful one. Now that we have won the crystal lottery, we want to use that one crystal to craft a pile more. To do so, we have to make a loop where we smash crystals and then make the fragments grow back by using europium. We could do that passively, but, since we are going to craft europium on demand, we also make a pattern for crystal on demand. We will input europium for 2 crystals in the loop, so that 1 crystal will be outputted and 1 reused to make more crystals. There is going to be some extras, but that's a feature, not a bug. And, once we set up the 2 looping machines, we just have to input our only crystal and some europium to fill up the machines. Behold! The legendary mythical secret technique of the crystal multiplication. However, to use those crystals as processors we first have to cook them with some extra crystals. Since we can use both emerald or olivine and we can't make up our mind on which one to use, we do a custom pattern that does both at the same time. Once our crystals are cooked, we shoot them with lasers to get some chips, which we can now use to finally have our first crystal processor. And here something started to feel weird. For some reason, the cost of that circuit seems to be 6 times higher than expected. And the reason for that is that we are probably supposed to use a dedicated circuit assembling line to craft those circuits. But to use that, we also need a circuit imprint, which has to be made out of the circuit we want to make. So, we start by making a pattern for a circuit in the expensive way. But we do not automate that. We will have the ingredients dropped in a chest, so that we will use the expensive way only one time manually. Once the ingredients are ready, we craft our first crystal processor to use as a sample. All we have to do to turn it into an imprint is slice it and then add the stuff we fetched earlier on. Now that we have the imprint required to make circuits in the not as expensive way, we only need an assembly line where to place it. And, after some quick crafting, there we have it. All we have to do is place the imprint and then start making tons of circuits. And then something happened, the imprint made it so that this circuit line will only be able to craft this specific processor from now on. Even if we break it, there is no way of changing recipe. which means we are going to need a lot of those machines, at least one for each recipe. Also, like the normal assembly line, this one wants stuff in the correct place too. But since it will only craft one single recipe for its whole life, we can just use a filter system to ensure the ingredients go in the correct slot. And now we can slowly craft our first batch of circuits. As usual, they come in 4 clustering levels and we use the first 2 processors to make a processor assembly, in the expensive way. Then we slice it to make an imprint for those clustered circuits. And we bind forever that imprint to our second circuit assembling line. Then we realize that, at some point, we will want this setup to work faster than conduits can handle. So, we instead switch to an A2 subnetwork, which has virtually infinite throughput. By using stocking inputs buses which will allow the assembler to directly take millions of items at once from A2. That speed will be reached thanks to the perfect overclocks that will quadruple the machine speed every tier. For now we go slow. Next we prepare everything for crafting the last 2 clusters of crystal processors. And, with that, we have about finished the LuV tier. On a side note, we can also use the new machinery to make way cheaper HV circuits. And we can quickly update all of our patterns by just changing the way we make the generic HV circuit that is being used by all the patterns. Also, since all of our CPUs are waiting for the slow 4-circuit assemblers, we can make one more circuit assembling line in circuit assembler mode for generic simple circuits. The trick here is to have an advanced stocking input bus with auto pull enabled. That will turn the whole connected AE2 storage into an input bus for that machine. And with that, we are now making in 5 seconds the circuits that were taking 80 seconds in the clean room. With that, I think we can move to the ZPM tier, where we already rushed some things that were required for our reactor build. And here, instead of playing fetch, we play guess the item with some riddles. Since I'm not good at riddles whose solutions are items I don't have access to, we go with the glutton way. Hopefully, the ingredients in our farmhouse that hasn't been checked for 9 episodes didn't go bad. We quickly cook some of the food that this hard-working dude wants, but then we realize that we do not have any lime for his dessert. Since he is also picky, I guess the lesson here is not to give candy to strangers. They might not like the flavor you have at your disposal. Going back to our new quest page, I think we can finally get closer to the mid-game with this cool-looking block quest. And since those blocks require a ZPM assembler in a clean room, we have to either relocate our ZPM assembler in a processing array or in a clean room. But we will probably want to get a new one to speed up things. And since we are low on europium, we quickly build a fusion reactor that A2 will manage. But you should always do more machines than required. And with that we have our ZPM assembler that we shall place in a clean room. And now we can start working on crafting those cool looking blocks. Once we have made some of each one, we have to choose what machine we shall build with those. And I think we shall start from the active transformer. However, it looks that, somehow, we miss the monazite for crafting it. To find out how and why, we can check the crafting tree and follow the branch with the missing ingredient. And it turns out we are still using monazite for making helium. As a quick fix, we relocate a miner on a nice beach. That miner is of the highest tier and can mine an area of 300 by 300 blocks. Exactly the range of our ore prospector, making it so that the prospector shows exactly what we will dig. And upgrading our miners broke the transceiver cover. Once we replace it, we can see again our stats. One other source of helium we can use is from a multi-block plasma turbine running on helium plasma. And now that we have crafted our new transformer, we can start fixing all of the spaghetti under our base. We can now have one single high power cable being spread by the transformer into many lower power cables. And thus we spend some time rewiring our base. The next thing we can craft with the cool looking blocks is a data bank. This one is a multi-block that can take many data hatches, enough to contain all of the researched recipes we have done so far. Then, using optical fiber cables, it will spread the data to many assembly lines. That way, instead of having a limit of 17 recipes for each assembly line and having to research an item once for every assembly line, we can do everything on every assembly line. And, from the A2 side, instead of crafting copies of the same pattern for each assembly line, we can use a peer-to-peer interface. All the interface we link to the first one will share the same recipes. Thus, we can now make a lot of different items simultaneously in many assembly lines. And with that, I think we can move on with the progression. After completing the superconductor quest, usually, we would expect to unlock the energy hatch quest. However, nowadays it looks like it is being gated by something new. And the issue seems to be with the nano power integrated circuit. To work its wafer, we need some flocculated water. To flocculate water, we have to not get distracted by the cool looking UI and to get a flocculation purification unit. And I think we can all see where this is going. That thing is probably going to need its dedicated episode. Bye bye.